Hi class. So existential versus Gestalt therapy. Existential therapy is focused on the meaning of life, death, and dying, and how one's mortality affects how they live in their world today. Corey describes existential therapy as the philosophical approach. It asks questions about human nature, anxiety, deep despair, grief, and loneliness. The focus is on freedom and responsibility, that time here on earth is limited and that it is up to us to make the best of it. That we are not responsible for what we are born into, but that we are responsible for our destiny and our choices. Gestalt therapy is more focused on the present moment, where we feel things in our body. The future and past do not exist, only the present. Expanding awareness. Wholeness comes from finding and accepting that which is uncomfortable about ourselves physically, emotionally, and spiritually. And taking into account each part of the human experience. Some similarities of these therapies in both types of therapeutic relationship is very important to the effectiveness of counseling. In both, we're bringing forth awareness, and in both types, the counselor needs to be highly trained to avoid abusing their power and causing more harm than good. There are lots of differences to these therapies. One of them is that one focuses on the future, existential focuses on the future, and Gestalt focuses on the present moment and does not even take into account the future. Gestalt is very focused on the body and where feelings are felt, and Gestalt has empirical research to prove its effectiveness. Some strengths of existential therapy are that it gives new understanding to the complex feelings that we all feel of guilt, anxiety, loneliness, alienation, and approaching death. The key concepts can be easily integrated into other forms of therapy. There is an emphasis on individual self-awareness and the freedom to choose how we live our life. Weaknesses for existential therapy are that the individualistic focus may not fit well with everyone. This is according to Corey. Including those who have limited resources and choices due to multicultural, socioeconomic, or other factors. Counselors need to be highly trained to engage in this type of therapy. There are no specific techniques, which make it sort of hard to do the research on the effectiveness. And I had a concern while reading the Corey text was that if this type of therapy is done without the gospel, could it cause more despair? So for secular counselors, how is that conversation going if it's not rooted in the gospel? Which Tan cleared up for me later. And I'll get into that with the biblical concepts. So some strengths of Gestalt therapy are that it's a holistic approach that honors each individual's experience, which can make it more usable in culturally diverse situations. There's an increase in awareness, which is central to this approach. It integrates theory, practice, and research. It has that empirical research to prove its effectiveness. That is a definite strength of Gestalt therapy. A couple of weaknesses are there's a possibility of counselors abusing their power if they are not highly trained. And it would not work well with clients who struggle with imagery or with connecting feelings with words, maybe some psychological disorders it would not work well with for that reason. And it might be considered too positive by some, according to Corey. Some biblical concepts, existential therapy. So according to Tan, this approach is quite possibly the one that best incorporates biblical principles because it deals directly with death. And facing death, and which then allows us to deal with God's purpose for us while we're here and how we use this time here, which can then lead into discipleship and things of that nature. However, the counselor needs to be of a Christian background to effectively mirror these biblical concepts. Tan describes it as spiritually hopeless without the gospel. The Christian approach, however, effectively helps clients deal with the big struggles of life: purpose, anxiety, death, and loneliness. Gestalt therapy has some biblical concepts as well. Authenticity is important, confronting and overcoming self-deception, taking responsibility for ourselves and staying in the present moment. And I thought of a couple verses for staying, when I was thinking about staying in the present moment. There's the old is gone, and that we are a new creation. So that was one that I thought of. And then Matthew 6:34, more specifically, I thought about was that, and that verse says, "Therefore, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own." So those were just a couple of verses I was thinking of when I was thinking about Gestalt therapy and staying in the present moment in counseling. Some limitations of creating measurable outcomes. So I struggle with this question because I feel like in counseling there's always going to be limitations, because from my understanding so far, they're really the only way to assess outcomes are by observation and client report, both of which are influenced by outside factors. So I really struggle with that question, with measurable outcomes. One specific limitation of existential therapy is that there will always be these questions of why are we here, and there will always be anxiety. There will always be these things that come up, and so if you're measuring, you can't really measure it by saying, okay, that has gone away, because that doesn't go away. It's really how we deal with it. And I was thinking one way to overcome that limitation is maybe from the Christian perspective, if they are getting in their Bible more, and their relationship with God is growing, and they're feeling more confident in their purpose. So that sort of thing. And then for Gestalt therapy, at first I thought maybe this is a much easier way to find measurable outcomes, because it's so based on energy and where the client feels things. So I thought maybe, if they feel anxiety in their chest and that goes away over time, then that's a measurable outcome. However, what if they're actually having physical symptoms of a medical condition? There's no way for us to know that. So I don't feel like that is a very accurate way to measure either. And perhaps they're just simply unable to connect with those feelings, like we said earlier, as one of the weaknesses of Gestalt therapy. So those are my thoughts on existential versus Gestalt. This is really long. So thank you for watching.